Welcome to Executive Insights. My guest today is Julie Hansen, Global Executive Advisor from Salesforce. In this episode, we explore the changing priorities in the C suite since COVID 19. Julie shares insights about how organizations can best integrate economic, environmental, and social causes into their company culture. We double click on sustainability and why it has become such an important topic for the CFOs and investment community. We also discuss the role of IT, and Julie shares key considerations for a CIO in delivering a new and differentiated customer experience. Last but not least, Julie reflects on her career in technology and offers very useful advice for those choosing a new career path. Hi, Julie. So great to see you. Welcome to Executive Insights.
Hello, Nasheen. Thank you so much for having me today.
Julie, as a global executive advisor, you work extensively with your customers' senior leadership team to help them with their long term success. I'm wondering, what are the changing priorities in the C suite that you've observed in the past year?
Mhm. So I've observed a lot of things in the past year because, as you know, change is pretty constant with COVID. And so things have had to adjust along the way. I would say more recently, which is probably a good thing, the focus coming out of the C suite is to be a little bit more long term. And that kind of falls into a few categories I'll mention briefly. My thought behind that in the conversations as I'm gathering it together is you can't take for granted that your business is going to go back to how it was and that more change is apt to come. And so one of the things that has really taken center stage looking long term has to do with talent. Talent has been a gap for a lot of businesses for a long time now, and they're trying to figure that out just with the advancements of technology and automation. But really now it's looking at the employee almost as its own customer, and what do you really need to make them thrive, and what is the journey of an employee in your organization. So clearly there's things like safety and enablement, which people have had to look at, and the C suite right up to the CEO is very, very concerned about that. But there's also the retention, skilling and upskilling, and there's a trend even towards thinking through how to multi-skill people in your organization so they actually have a few different talents, and then you can have flex and agility in terms of where they play. But the biggest thing is a lot of conversations around culture where innovation's top of mind. There's a lot of organizations realizing that mindsets are holding them back, or they're now changing because they'd have to take away some of the traditional mindsets to make new decisions and better decisions. And often, with innovation or change or anything that's going on, success and failure really comes down to people. A couple other things I can think about is digital enablement is definitely top of mind, and that has to do with what happens when a pandemic places everybody at home. E-commerce is growing a lot, so there's a lot of conversations around putting the business online and also getting into B2B commerce, where that may not have been a draw for some businesses before. It is for sure now. New business models we talk about a lot. When you want to get to your data, what do those new business models look like? And there's a lot of M&A driving that. So you're seeing a lot of diversification happening where there's certain ideas around risk mitigation and how to get into adjacent businesses faster. So M&A activity is going to speed up and has been speeding up for a little while. And the last sort of thing I'll say looking forward has to do with shareholder values. So organizations are realizing there's more stakeholders than just your shareholders, and that those voices are going to get stronger. So I mentioned too, the customer and the employee they are definitely two stakeholders you have to think about with when you're looking forward long term. Also, you need to look at your investors, communities around you, and the planet. So when you think about what makes a successful long-term business, there's a lot more elements that are coming to the forefront that have to be considered. Behind all of that, data is driving a lot of conversations that I'm having. Everybody wants it, even more so now when you're thinking you're going to go digitize. How do you use that data? One of the things that's stopping a lot of people from really using the data in conversations, one is getting to the data, but the other is having a proficiency in the organization, a literacy around really knowing what to do with the data, having proper governance, and also having communities where you can share best practices. And so those things are definitely top of mind, constant conversations. And this even goes to the CEO themselves and the C suite. There needs to be more literacy at all levels of the organization, and you should really democratize analytics across your organization so that you can have transparent conversations at all levels and allow everyone to have a stronger skill set. And the last thing I'll say, Nasheen, around this question has to do with risk mitigation. It's not in a lot of conversations, but it should be, and it should be soon. And I say that because this is probably not the last pandemic or crisis we're going to face. And so one of the things I've noticed is the organizations who have gone through a crisis in the past have stronger business continuity and continuance plans in place, so they weren't affected as much this time. So this should be top of mind in the next little while, right? It doesn't have to be immediate, but you're going to have to learn from what's happened and talk to other organizations. One of the things humans are good at is once we get past something, forgetting about it and then not putting the right things in place across the organization or a community or a government, et cetera, to make us in a better place for what's going to come next, because we know change is constant. So
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your wealth of insights, especially from a global perspective. I feel like we could have an entire interview just to dedicate to this very question. One of the silver linings from the pandemic to me is really this provides a once in a lifetime opportunity for organizations to not just rapidly evolve their digital capabilities, but to also rethink about their purposes, their whys, and reset the directions. Your CEO has famously said that doing well and doing good can coexist, and that business is the greatest platform for change. And having been a Salesforce partner for so many years, I can say first-handedly that Salesforce lives by those mantras. But many organizations seems to struggle with integrating the economic, environmental, and social causes into their culture and business strategies. What would be your advice? Can you share an example or two about how Salesforce does it?
I've been at Salesforce for almost 14 years. And one of the most interesting process flows that we have every year is our business strategy definition. We have something called the V2MOM. It's visions, values, methods, obstacles, and metrics. And those are just the categories of the strategy that we run every year. So what's interesting about that strategy and how we go about it at Salesforce is that it's aligned to our values. So the second V is value. And we run off of four values. They guide us in everything we do. It's trust, customer success, innovation, and equality. And so when it comes to placing things like purpose driven objectives into how Salesforce executes every year in our long term vision, they are put right into this business strategy with ownership around it every year. And the strategy is created first by Mark Benioff and his leadership team, and it cascades. And so everyone in the company has created a similar strategy document for their role within the company. And it's all transparent. How is it transparent? I can look up anyone's V2MOM to see what they're up to for a given year and in past years. And so that allows the culture to shift inside of Salesforce to be even more open, conversations more fluent. And when it comes to purpose driven, like some of the things that we do, like we have one of our pillars of our company is the 1-1-1 model, where we give back 1% of employees' time, our revenue and resources or product back into the communities around us. That's one of the ways that we give back to help other organizations also be impact driven. We do a lot of different types of volunteer work to help guide organizations, not for profits and specifically, in a lot of cases, to be able to think through how they can drive more success and more impact. And that cascades along. The other piece to what makes Salesforce special as an organization is this strategy is flexible. So always think about your strategy as flexible. It's to guide you. It's not to be set in stone. And so we reassess the strategy mid-year and think about how we need to do things differently. When COVID hit, we reassessed it immediately again, and that drove our response. And the other piece that we have is our technology is very responsive. And so we immediately looked at our values and how we could give back to the communities around us. We all did as individuals. And so with our technology, we were able to make some really great impacts into different organizations that needed us during COVID to be able to do things like help with contact tracing or to help with certain systems for registrations into hospitals where backing up or sites were going down. There were just so many ways that we could be responsive. And what drove us is our values. We've always been there. We're now looking at helping with vaccine distribution, which is top of mind for many people around the world. And it's the flexibility of the platform and our ability to flex and do the right thing as an organization combined that allows us to be so impactful. And, that's one of the things I love about working for this company.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. I'm just so inspired just by listening to you. And I think those are very tangible examples for other business leaders and organizations to consider as well. I do want to double click on the sustainability aspect because when you and I had a conversation recently, you actually mentioned that sustainability has become such a big focus for CFOs and the investment community around the world as a measure for business longevity, and that it really should be on every C suite and board's agenda. Can you elaborate on that?
So the world is changing a lot right now in terms of we're all being impacted by something we didn't anticipate. A pandemic is impacting people's lives in so many ways. And at some point, they're going to look to the companies and organizations around them, around all of us, to see how we can be protected and how we can do better as a society. So there are pressures coming down to organizations, and the pandemic is making that happen even more so. And it's around not just climate, but it's also social expectations and governance aspects that should be put in place. And so when you think about one of the individuals that's going to be responsible for measuring and reporting back to us, to investors, to other stakeholders, how that company is doing in terms of how that company is being more purpose driven towards things like the environment and driving maybe carbon reduction, for example, or taking a look at human rights as a very important factor and how to look at more diversity and inclusion within organizations, or driving supply chains to employ more people in emerging countries. All those things are going to come down to measures which roll up into the CFO's office. And so today there's a lot of ways that CFOs look at. Obviously, to the street, there's your financials that you have to set out, but there are other ways to measure success long term. And there's a term called integrated reporting. It's basically saying, what are the other ways that you're measuring your success and driving to be purpose driven and making a positive impact in the world? The economy, the environment, society, and governance models. And right now, those are voluntary types of reports that CFOs can place out there through different organizations. And those things are used by companies like BlackRock to assess an organization. Will they be around long term? What are they doing that's positively impactful that my investors, my funds are going to like? And how do we measure that? If CFOs are not measuring and putting integrated reporting out to these associations, what happens is that assessments get done without the involvement of the company. And so the reputation of the company out on the street could be quite different than what they're actually doing as an organization, maybe to drive ESGs. And so that's where the pressure is going to come down on the CFOs to think through, what are you measuring? And it always comes back to data. What does that supply chain look like? What does the brand reputation, what kind of hit is it going to take if we're not being a purpose-driven organization 3 to 5 years from now? So the changes, you have to consider them now, because there are a lot of things that go into place. What's most material for your company? And as you mentioned, this goes right up to the board level. So boards should be able to guide and advise on this, and it filter into the strategy of your executive leadership teams and down through into the organization where everyone wants to be a part of something that is purpose driven.
Yeah, excellent insights. And I do agree, those are so important and strategic initiatives. And I think, in a way, the pandemic has accelerated the mindset and how we prioritize ESG as a corporate mandate. I do want to pivot a little bit and talk about the role of the CIO and IT. We all agree the role of the CIO and IT has never been more important. And today, more CIOs have a seat at the C suite table and are forging even stronger relationships with their CEOs and their C suite peers. And also, CIOs are no longer just accountable for providing technology leadership, but many of them are on the driver's seat for driving the digital transformation efforts and looking for ways to deliver new and differentiated customer experience. What would be your advice for the leadership in terms of key considerations for delivering a unique customer experience?
One of the thoughts that first comes to mind is, how do you know what a great customer experience is if you don't involve your customer? The customer experience, I've learned this in a few different ways, not just working at Salesforce, but also through philanthropic efforts, where I've talked to leaders who thought they knew best because they had been in the same situation before and they didn't have it right. Their current customer, in this case, it was children, is the example I'm thinking of. They needed something different than what that individual had at their disposal, many years before. And so, what I've learned from that conversation and also working with corporations is that you need to engage your customer, whoever that is. If it's your customer, in terms of where your revenue comes from, your partners, your employees, other stakeholders, you have to engage them often and keep them close to you. And that can help drive where you need to go. And that's where the business strategy is going to come from. When you're thinking through a customer experience, how closely are you aligned with your CEO? Some of the best CIOs I've seen are business partners to their CEOs today. That's a big shift from like past years. When you think about the CIO driving the technology is something you back into your business strategy. And your business strategy is based on, where do you want to go? And how do you keep your customers engaged with you? What's their journey? And what does that experience look like for them? And then you think about how technology can play a role to make that an even more unique experience. So strategic planning is super important. Also, it always comes back to talent. Like CEOs, they are wondering, do I have the right people on the bus? And that means as a CIO, are you the right person to be there along with your CHRO and other leaders to be able to move forward for a successful future? And part of that has to do with looking at what you bring to the table as an individual. And so I always think of this as diversity of thought. There are lots of different executive roles out there, but when you come together as a group, what does that look like? All the way to the board level. How diverse is the board? How diverse are leadership teams? As a CIO, what is your diversity within your own team? And how can you tap that so that you have curiosity and an ability to look at things differently, to pivot the business and to go after what the customer is asking you for? And so it's really about being a business partner and aligning to the business drivers and being open to, the support of data, but really harnessing the talent and creating other leadership around you that can help you drive forward.
Agreed. And Julie, you've had a very successful career in technology. What's the most rewarding aspect for being in this industry? And if you could do it all over again, what would you change?
I think one of the most rewarding aspects to me, because I'm a people person, I just happen to be highly technical as well, is working with people to solve problems and really understanding, seeing the nuances and the differences across businesses and the people that make up those businesses, and how they run into challenges and how we can fix that. So, like the engagement with individuals and leaders and teams is one of my favorite things. And working at Salesforce, I love the fact that I can be involved in certain aspects that really drive making a difference for others in different ways. I don't think I would do something different if I was to go back and do it over because there's so much going on today. I would think let's just go forward from today and leverage some of the cool things happening now. When I thought about that, if I was to go back, I'd almost think about this as like a piece of advice for students, people who are earlier on in their careers or they're back in school, is I would say seek to understand more and earlier, meaning how do you know what you want to do from a career perspective? Do you want to end up in IT? What does that mean? And I think a lot of people can go off into school thinking they want to be in IT or they want to be a lawyer, not truly understanding what the job role is or what the career path is. And I think one of the most exciting and fun ways of doing that is to, ask questions and ask to be introduced to people and to spend time with them. Along the way, you'll end up building a lot of assertiveness, curiosity, problem solving. You learn to communicate with different people you might not interact with day to day. And that carries us through into who we are as adults in our jobs, like in our careers now. And so that's one thing that I would say if I was going to do it again, I would go back and learn more. And I might have pivoted faster in terms of, what I'd done from a career perspective.
Thank you so much, Julie, for spending the time with me today and for sharing all your insights and advice. I really appreciate it. You've been watching another episode of Executive Insights by the IT Media Group. Thank you for tuning in. If you like this video, please check out other CIO and leadership centric content on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe